Chapter 12, Hannah Dunn 8, May 6, 2030 AD. The Shadow Man is Real was blowing up. She had several hits every hour on every one of her posts dating all the way back to when she'd first started the site, and she absolutely loved it. It seemed that her dedication had set her site above the rest, and it seemed her website was now the foremost place to visit for people to get information about the spirit vigilante. Emails were pouring into her inbox, so many that she mostly ignored them, but when one popped up from a syndicated news program asking to interview her, she jumped at the chance. "It'll be nice to be the one getting interviewed for once," Hannah said to the somewhat dismissive news anchor with a smile, as the makeup crew applied their final touches, some to her already flawless face, but mostly to that of the male anchorman. "Yes," he said in a subtly foreboding tone, "this will be interesting." The way he said it made her a little uneasy, and she adjusted her place in her chair, suddenly uncomfortable. It dawned on her just then that she in fact wasn't going to be conducting the interview, and that she had no idea what he was going to ask her, and the gears in her head already started turning in anticipation of some challenging questions. The countdown to filming began, and then they went live. "Hello everyone, I'm Chad Borden, and this is Borden Underground," the anchorman said to the camera. "Tonight we have with us Miss Hannah Dunn, proprietor of the popular website The Shadow Man is Real, here tonight to discuss the very topic at the heart of the controversy gripping America and indeed the world right now. Is the Shadow Man real, as the name of her website so confidently proclaims, or is the whole thing an elaborate hoax? And if he is real, should he be allowed to do what he is doing? Is he right or wrong? All this coming up. Stay with us." The teaser finished, they cut to a brief commercial break, and as they awaited the countdown to air, Hannah tried again to make conversation. She said, "I'm really excited. Thank you for having me on your show." "Yes," he said. "Hopefully you'll fetch us some good ratings." The silent countdown concluded, and the shortened version of the Borden Underground theme song used for breaks played from unseen speakers. Then the anchorman looked into the camera and said, "We're back. We have with us Hannah Dunn, foremost expert on the alleged spirit captured in the video footage preceding the murder of Alfonso Hamilton and the near-complete destruction of an elevator in Las Vegas, Nevada 1 week ago. Her website, The Shadow Man is Real, features written accounts of reported events, photographs of damage allegedly done by the spirit, and pictures of locations where it supposedly has appeared, along with so much more, as well as video clips of interviews she herself conducts with fellow survivors of attacks allegedly thwarted by the supposed Shadow Man, she herself being a survivor of one such alleged attack." Then he turned to face Hannah as the camera pulled back to capture the both of them. It would be one of only a handful of times that she would appear on television alive, not as a representative of the Society of the Spirit, and the recording would end up becoming very famous. Starting in the year 2115, the video of her interview on Borden Underground would be added to the world history curriculum for schools worldwide, and would be seen by every child from then on until the destruction of civilization in 2311. "Let's begin there," he said. "Tell us what happened the night you supposedly witnessed this spirit." Without any amateurish hesitation or reluctance, she held her own as if she were scripted herself. Beautiful and smart and talented and world, meet Hannah Dunn. "Well, Chad, I'll tell you. To begin with, there is nothing supposed about the Shadow Man. He is as real as you or I. Ask any one of the people he has saved, and they will agree with 100% certainty that he was no apparition or hallucination. He is absolutely real. The night that a man followed me home from a bar, invaded my home, waited for me, and then came up behind me, wrapped a towel around my head covering my whole face, yanking my body backwards in the process, knocking me clear off my feet, then started dragging me down the hall toward my bedroom, would have been the night I would have died if the Shadow Man had not appeared and instead killed the man who was going to kill me. When he let go of the towel and I got it off my face, I saw him plain as day. How do I know he is real?" She looked into the camera. "Because I saw him holding the man who would have otherwise killed me, holding him by the throat in the air in front of him, and then I saw him bring his crystal ball down on his head, completely caving in his skull. Then he stood there holding the body and looked into his crystal ball, and then he dropped the body and disappeared, leaving me alone with the corpse of my would-be killer." Said the anchorman, impressed with how well she handled the camera. "So what do you say to people who believe that this is all a hoax and that he isn't real?" I have uncovered several staged, faked accounts of his appearance that lend credit to the idea that he may not be real, which is unfortunate. And of course, not everybody has seen him, otherwise we wouldn't be having this conversation, she said. But to those who deny he exists, I sympathize. I say that if I were in your shoes, I might feel exactly the same way. Until the emergence of last week's video footage, I would have encouraged anyone skeptical of him to try and keep an open mind and see the evidence for themselves. Look through my website, The Shadow Man is Real. I wouldn't even begin to know where to tell you to start. There is so much content, but I need not even do that anymore, because seeing is believing, and last week we all saw him. He is absolutely real. I suppose being an alleged survivor gives you a unique perspective on my next question. He leaned in a little. Hannah, do you think that what he is doing is right? He allegedly saves people, but he also kills people. Now, I know you're going to say that he supposedly only trades a life for a life, as you say numerous times on your website, but in the case of Alfonso Hamilton, the surveillance footage clearly shows an unarmed robbery taking place. No one's life was ever in danger in that scenario. Can he be justified in killing that poor man, especially in such a brutal way as he did? She flashed a scathing glance at him under her television facade and said, I don't know about Alfonso Hamilton or why the Shadow Man felt that he deserved to die, but I certainly wouldn't call it brutal. You saw the video. He never saw it coming, and his death was instantaneous. Why the Shadow Man continued to beat on his dead body after he was clearly dead, I'm afraid I'll never know. Like you said, Chad, there is no precedence for what occurred last week. In every other verified instance of an appearance of the Shadow Man resulting in a consequent death, which doesn't happen every time, by the way, the person that he kills is killed quickly and their body is left unmolested. Another bizarre inconsistency in this case is that his crystal ball seemed to be red, and it didn't look, perhaps only because of the camera angle, but it didn't look like he was holding it. It looked like it had replaced his hand entirely. Something was happening in that elevator that was different. I just haven't got a clue what it was. My every attempt to reach out to the witnesses, Amanda Reddington and her son, has met with failure. So until I can maybe get a look at the damage myself or get more information somehow, I know as much about what happened last week as anyone else. Okay, he said, but you didn't answer my question. Is what he's doing right or wrong? Some things are both, Chad, she said. All I know is that I wouldn't be alive today if he hadn't saved me. Fair enough, he said. Let's talk about that crystal ball you mentioned. What makes you think that it is in fact a crystal ball? Well, think about it, she said. He can obviously see what's happening around him without the use of his eyes, otherwise he wouldn't know when people are in peril. And his spirit carries a ball around which it not only uses as a weapon, but seems to consult before taking action, or at least has on several occasions. It seems to me that the Shadow Man gets information about the future from his crystal ball, which he then uses to put himself in the right place at the right time to save those he saves. It was really remarkable how close she had come to understanding the truth using only her intellect and experience. She would never learn the truth about him, that Daniel sees the present into the past by way of the world's eyes and then extrapolates from the collective experience of the world what is going to happen next before he acts. It did give him very good predictive powers, but as good as they were incomparable to the sight of Lylin. She was the puppeteer. Provided you can accept that a crystal ball can actually divine the future, the anchorman said. I saw that your website actually had a whole section on the history of crystal balls. I was expecting it to be far-fetched, but it reads more like a science journal. So given that you have not been able to verify that crystal balls actually can predict the future, what still makes you confident that it's a crystal ball that the Shadow Man reportedly seems to always have with him? I can't imagine what else it could be, she said. Wouldn't it be silly to find out that it's a coconut or something? Yes, I suppose that would be. He smiled, something he rarely did, but she was just so charming and disarming. And you believe that the Shadow Man is a real man living among us? Yes, she said. All the verified sightings of him have come from Las Vegas, Nevada and the surrounding greater area. I am confident that he is a real man living here in Las Vegas or possibly dead and buried in Las Vegas. The anchorman paused and then said, That's a chilling thought, Hannah. An avenger back from the dead to save his city. Normally, he would have passed the dialogue back with a question attached to keep things going. That's what reporters do. But he wanted to hear her unprovoked response, so another brief pause passed. I believe that he is always watching over us, she said, alive or not. and that he can save us if we let him. If people weren't in the habit of killing each other already, there'd be no reason for him to be here. If you don't want to risk getting killed by the Shadow Man, don't try killing anyone else. If a man knew that he was going to die at the hands of the Shadow Man before he attempted to murder someone else, do you think that he would still try it, knowing that he will not only fail, but that he will with all certainty die trying? What are you saying? Chad had a good feeling, and he was going to let the red-headed stunner steal the show in 3, 2, 1. I'm saying that this spirit, whatever his name may be, is the greatest thing that has ever happened to mankind, she said. Because for the first time in history, mankind is being held accountable for his actions by a force higher than itself. According to my research, his range of influence is spreading, becoming broader and broader, and though the majority of sightings still occur here, I believe that as the borders of his influence continue to expand, he will eventually be everywhere. When all the hands that would strike down their brothers are crushed around the world, there will be no more fear of them, and the peaceful men and women of the world will be all that remain. I'm not a Christian, Chad, but it sure sounds like the meek inheriting the earth to me. Hannah, are you saying what I think you're saying? The anchorman said. I don't know, she said. What do you think I'm saying? That the Shadow Man is the second coming of Christ? Like I said, I'm no Christian, she said. But from what I understand about Jesus, he was not the violent type. But you're the one who said it, Chad. Could it be the Holy Ghost in material form if such a thing exists? Who's to say? It seems to me that he is calling the wheat from the chaff, as it says in the Bible somewhere. Maybe it is all a means to an end. The anchorman stayed from comment and let her come in again after the next silence. If history has taught us anything, Chad, Hannah said, it's that amid the people of the earth lurk monsters in the skin of men. Mankind has been so horrible to one another for so long, maybe whatever deity exists, if any, decided that enough was enough and sent us a protector to shield brother from brother as it ought never to have been. Maybe he is a god himself. One thing that is for certain is that he is no mere mortal man. Speculation and conjecture are endless. Look for the facts, follow the evidence, and see for yourself. I encourage everyone watching this to visit my website, The Shadow Man is Real, and learn more about the spirit dubbed the Shadow Man for yourselves. It is highly informative, revelatory really. Learn about his history, and please, if anyone out there has any information to share, I can be reached through the email address listed on the site. I urge you to come forward with your story. Lylan 7.1, October 14th, 535 AD. His love had bid him walk until he came upon a city built by animals, and puzzled, he had walked in the direction she pointed until, much to his surprise, he found one. As he continued on his vigil through the brush of what would one day be Brazil, he came upon one of the most massive communities of termite colonies the world had ever seen. Some of the mounds the insect communities had built were over 15 feet tall, taller even than Hemhut. There were thousands and thousands of individual termite mounds adorning the whole landscape. It was remarkable, and they stretched on through the undergrowth under a canopy of foliage for as far as the eye could see. His love had bade him live with the animals, and promised that they would conceal him from view with no need for further influence. He needed only to stand in their midst, and they would hide him in short order. So he walked a few hundred yards into the termite city and found a nice place to stand. The generations had been at work devouring the forest floor there for over 2,000 years, but never before with a giant in their company. The giant gave them something wonderful, the coolness of his body. Termite mounds get very hot due to the constant work of the colony's collective metabolism, and many are built with vents or other more ingenious methods of cooling. But the presence of the cool-skinned giant negated the need for venting and provided the perfect foundation for the discerning queen. One of the hives of termites began to live underneath and upon his body, and built a mound around it shortly thereafter. Termite mounds are built from mud and termite saliva and fecal matter, but they do not smell bad. They often smell much like the environment in which they are built, which makes sense considering that they are composed of the physically transformed remnants of the surrounding environment itself. Termite queens have the longest lifespan of any insect on Earth, and one of them even ruled the hive in the mound built around Hemhut for over 20 years before she died. When a queen died, the colony she mothered died off in short order, but he was never alone for long. It was never more than a few years before a new king and queen would discover and occupy his recently vacated mound, and their offspring would begin expanding on the structure again. In time, his was the mightiest mound in the sprawling metropolis, towering over the others the way Hamhut did over ordinary men. Then it came. The sound he had been awaiting, the voice of his love, and the momentous mound burst open and crumbled behind him as he stepped away from it. Centuries of work by dozens of generations consisting of trillions of termites was destroyed. Luckily, it was vacant at the time, and his departure did not cost a single one of them their lives, but the towering spectacle was down, and the once proud mound now looked rather like a fallen tree, a steep descent from its former glory. The sticky compound that comprised the mound fell from him as he moved, and within a few steps he was again naked and clean, leaving only clay-colored dust and bits in a short trail behind him as he strode through the forest in the direction of her voice. She was near. Mckeever was the daughter of a warrior chieftain, head of a tribe of native Ecuadorians whose name would be forever lost to history when their culture, already weakened by attacks from the neighboring Mayans, suffers the effects of the impending global famine that would wipe them out entirely, the world now standing on the precipice of the cataclysmic eruption that triggers its melee. She knew nothing of any impending doom, for even as her vision began to broaden and she began to discover that there were people living everywhere, many even far across the oceans, something wholly unknown to her and her people, not one person had their eyes on the massive volcano that stood ready to deliver so much death and misery to the world. Even future scientists would debate over the location of the eruption, with much evidence to support the idea that it occurred in El Salvador and much also to suggest that it may have happened in Iceland. She was perhaps the most astute of all that would be Lylan. It did not take her long to figure out that the smeared images she was seeing were actually not a bending of images, but a bending of time, and she was the first vessel of Lylan in over 3,000 years to be completely unafraid of her newfound powers from the onset. Her people were called the Nehoagin, and despite their embrace of pagan rituals and rampant superstitions, she knew that she had nothing to fear from her people. So she, with her father's consent and blessing, announced to them all that she had been gifted with the visions of others, and that the future was steadily being revealed to her, and spoke of machines and structures from around the world, painting as vivid a picture for them as she could manage of what she was seeing. She did this by the end of the second day. None but Queen Sapretta, the first incarnation of Lylan, had ever been so bold. Her gifts were immediately celebrated, and word spread quickly through the tribes of the land of Mckeever's strange new powers. 2 scouts from a neighboring peaceful people came to the Nehoagin's village to witness her abilities for themselves, at the command of their wise man, and verify the truth of the tales. When she performed to their satisfaction, the scouts announced that they had been authorized to invite her, her father, and party to visit their village. They said that he wished to bestow upon her a gift beyond that of wisdom. She could see through the wise man's eyes, but had no visions yet of the future beyond mere seconds, so she had no reason to be suspicious of their intentions. It was decided, and the band departed the next day. The wise man was careful to conceal what he was doing as he crafted her gift. Every time he sharpened or handled the wooden stake he intended to hide in the totem, he looked elsewhere. When he fastened it in place, concealed at the base of the totem, he pretended to stare at a young girl from out of the entrance to his mud hut. He was clever. He kept his mind clear of his intentions for fear that she might be able to read his mind. He was a wise man indeed. When the party arrived late in the day, they were greeted with a warm and welcoming crowd. All of them were greatly anticipating the arrival of the one who sees with many eyes, as they called her in their native tongue. The children especially were excited, and immediately started asking her questions in a dialect that she had some difficulty understanding. One of the scouts interpreted for her some select questions from the waiting pool of children around her, and for once her father felt out of place. Normally, he was the one to draw attention. He was a chieftain, after all. The wise man came out to meet them, hobbling on his deteriorating leg, clutching a tall staff to right his balance. It was a little foreboding, as it appeared that he approached her one step at a time, and despite his slow speed, the village had parted when he'd emerged from his hut to form an aisle between them, well before he was ever going to reach her. "So," he said in his lost language, "this is one who sees with many eyes. Tell me, girl, is it true?" She turned to look at the scout who had interpreted for her moments earlier, and he translated what he'd said as well as he could for her. Then she turned to face the wise man and responded in the dialect of her people. Yes, O wise man, I see all that all others see, and moments ahead in time through them all if I choose. The scout cocked his head, unsure if he'd heard her right, and clarified. You see the future? Yes, she said, as far into the future as it takes a stone to land after having been thrown ahead 15 paces, and steps farther still with every moon and sun. He hesitated, but she motioned excitedly toward the wise man and said, Tell him, tell him. The scout kept his eyes on her as he translated for the wise man. The wise man laughed, having no doubt now that this creature was indeed the foretold harbinger of death so prevalent in their legends. He was right. He would have to destroy her, but he had to be very smart and very quick and time it just right, or he would be thwarted. Even with her powers, she was just a young girl. If he could get her alone, then he could kill her even if she could see it coming. She could not overpower him. Feeble as his leg was, he was still a man. Surely, killing a defenseless girl should be no trouble, whether she sees the weapon or not. Wonderful, he said. Then let one who sees with many eyes be known also as one who knows many tomorrows. Celebration is in order. Tonight we feast to honor the gods who gifted you such powers in all their great wisdom. He raised his free arm and shook a hollowed rind that had been meticulously painted and filled with dried seeds and berries before being sealed, a ceremonial rattle, and the village cheered. The scout advised her of what he'd said, and she thanked the wise man, who had just then finally reached her and taken her by the hand. The word to express gratitude did not need translation, and the wise man smiled at her, never offering so much as a hint of his murderous intent. Mckeever, the one who sees through many eyes, the one who knows many tomorrows, did not suspect a thing. He'd discover later that night what a waste of his time plotting against her had been, but by no fault of his own. For the crash of the giant's movements through the thick growth could already be heard in the distance under the setting sun. The weapon he'd fashioned and hidden in the totem would draw blood before night's end, but not from its mark.